My name's Pierre Dracula. I think half of my streams, I don't even remember to say my name. I'm just like, hey, anyways. Um, but it's Friday. We are going to be streaming with Ricky B. Rat. And there's my little handy dandy schedule flyer. So we'll move that out of the way. Now, last week, when we left off, Ricky was telling us about his duties as the runner at the studio, including bringing palletfuls of burgers and fries into the studio clients, loading down his little car full of pizza, fetching beer, all the things, so that bands and studio engineers don't have to leave. That is Ricky's job to go fetch things for them. Anyways, so that was part of the main story, but as we've had several times throughout this book, Ricky B goes to sea, the main story gets interrupted with the B story, which is these intrusive ads. I think we're all kind of familiar with that from social media. So, and the intrusive ads are listening to what Ricky is telling us because they tend to do that nowadays. So, what does that mean? That means it's time for some ads related to what we just saw in the previous spread. And I will quickly pull that out and show y'all again. So this was from last week. Ricky getting a little sidetracked after work. There he is bringing booze into Rat Trap Studios, using his tail to help carry in all the bags full of takeout containers, whole barrel of cinnamon whiskey, Firerat brand. And then there he is with the forklift and the burgers. There he is bringing in pizza. He's got his wagon loaded with chips and cheesies and all that. Then the wagon loaded with Rat Cola, because of course, you got to wash all this other crap down. Well, I mean, you can use the Firerat Cinnamon Whiskey, but still. Lastly, definitely not cola. So all this work has been interrupting Ricky's plans to build himself a submarine to fulfill what he believes the Lord has told him to do, which is to go out into the sea and fetch the big shiny rock from the shipwreck movie to impress his girlfriend. But, Ricky's taking a while to figure out how to do that. So now it's time for our ad intrusion. And those would be the companies that we just saw Ricky patronizing, starting with the world famous McRat burger. Not made from rats, because, of course, in this comic, everybody is a rat, but rather founded by some dude whose name was McRat. And do they have a clown mascot? Oh, probably. you know, it's a tribute, not a ripoff, right? Um, Anyways, so we are going to get busy with inking this. I'm using a dip pen with India ink. And I'm going to do a little tiny bit of hand-done typography. I'm not going to worry too much about filling this in perfectly, though. Because maybe McRatburger is trying to look all old-timey, to con people into thinking that it's high-quality food back from the days when people made things by hand. Although, there was one of the BBC series, I forget the title exactly, but it was like about bakeries through time in the Victorian era. And I think there were a few episodes, and one of them had to do when industrialization first kicked off, and the adulterants, and shall we say substitutions, I guess would be the polite way to put it, that were being put into flour and bread to kind of increase profit margins and stuff like that. And yeah, it was a little disturbing. I mean, we think bread is bad for us now, but oof, that particular phase of the Victorian era was it was a doozy. Anyways, so here we go. Point is that ye olden days doesn't necessarily mean things were more done in a more wholesome manner with better quality ingredients. Uh, at least you have to be very clear about when ye olden days was. So, got McRats and the ad copy 50% less. And I've got a just had the sense of a big glob of ink wanting to drop off my pen right in the middle of my lettering. So, got my ink in a shot glass off to the side. So, when you see me doing this, that's I'm either getting ink or dumping off excess ink. So, McRat Burger is bragging that they have 57% less. Trying to get the right amount of ink where it's enough to work with, but not so much that I risk it going like, you know. Anyways, 50% less flies. And then their great rival, Rat King. I ripped apart Brody. I assume your name is Brody. Hello, Brody. And hello, Be Bubbles. Welcome to the show. So, and of course, here, obviously, we're kind of poking fun of, the whole burger rivalries that we have in our real world. But hello again. So we got that add copy, and we're going to just give this a kind of a spiny amoeba kind of bubble to make it stand out. Sub. Oh, hey, thank you for subbing. That's awesome. Much appreciated. And I do stream 5 nights a week, generally speaking, at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. This project, Ricky B, the Rock and Roll Rat, is mostly done on Friday, but I have a related project right now on Mondays. And then I've got a different comic project, Noah's Archipelago, that I work on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Salmo the Destroyer, about an obnoxious talking iguana, on Wednesdays. So, got a variety of this sort of stuff. Let's see here. So we got that, and because I'm working with liquid ink, I always kind of work in this direction because I'm clumsy, and believe me, well, oh, actually, that's still, I don't know if that really shows up on camera, but that is ink from Wednesday night. so, so, so the reveal of the design, I'm working over a non-photo blue pencil underdrawing, so it kind of shows a teensy bit. Hi, Lily, how's it going? Welcome to the show. So shows the underdrawing shows a wee tiny bit in the camera, but the idea is when all is said and done, if I scan this in black and white, the non-photo blue pencil should vanish, thereby saving me a lot of photoshopping time if I had to deal with like a pencil underdrawing. Now I am going to draw the McRat burger as delicious looking as I can because, of course, it's an ad and ads lie. It's the same thing as, you know, our real world burger joints where you go, hey, see the ad. It's like, hey, that looks delicious. And then you go buy it and went, oh, you love the drawing. Thank you. Yeah, kind of give a little bit of shading on the burger. Bun's looking a little bit over toasted, but hey, that just means it's crispy, right? Long, long ago, there was that sub place Quiznos, and their whole ad campaign was toasted tastes better. So we're kind of playing off of that. Now, what I'm drawing on is Bristol board paper, and I think this one is um, the Vellum Finish Canson brand, and they're partially recycled. I do find with like the narrower nibs like this that this paper tends to gouge a little bit, and then I'm always having to kind of wipe the nib off on a paper towel off to the side, but it's kind of part of the deal when you're working with a dip pen. So we're still interested. Good, glad to hear it. So we have some sort of a sauce, could be mayo, could be a mystery, a proprietary brand, goober, kind of goobery sauce. Uh, could be a cheese sauce too, although there's going to be cheese on this anyways. So now we'll draw the cheese slices. Although knowing this joint is probably cheese like spelled with a Z, meaning not really cheese, but a cheese-like substance. But, the rats don't care. Get our burger patty drawn in here. Of course, we can make it work, yeah. Yeah, let's try and something that kind of gives the sense of there being maybe some lettuce on the burger. And before I draw the bottom bun, this little blurb overlaps it, so we will do that next. And that's probably the best any McRat burger has ever looked in the history of McRat burger, but the magic of advertising. And clearly, with the between McRat Burger and Rat Cola refills, one kind of assumes that this is going to be the combo that sponsors whatever version of the Olympics they have in Ricky's world. I think a couple months ago I did a little brainstorming live stream one Tuesday night with my characters in different sports, and Ricky's preferred sport was competitive eating, and his buddy Miles had to advise him that that isn't actually a sport. Ricky's still going to train for it as if it was, though. I think I'll add some of this stippling texture onto the top of the burger as well. We'll kind of give a bit of a shadow underneath the lettuce. Like that. A little bit of texture in here, whether it's maybe a little bit of grease or a little bit of extra sauce slipping down. And now we finish off the lettering and we move on to the next of our uh, fictional ads here in the Ricky universe. I'm going to put serifs on those letters. I'll also put them here. Serifs are the kind of little like bars that go across on lettering. Kind of gives it a bit of a little more. I don't know about if it actually reads as formal or we've just kind of culturally tended to assume serif letters are used in more formal situations. But uh, I had not drawn in an S to make burgers plural, but I kind of feel like it needs one. So we will do that. McRat's Burgers. There we go for the first ad. Now, what I normally do separating comic panels is I just put a big fat black line in between rather than draw a box and have a white division. Um, so we are going to go ahead and do that right now. And now back to the more narrow dip pen. So, one of the other things Ricky is bringing into the studio on sessions in his role as a studio runner is copious amounts of alcohol. And we are specifically going to have an ad for Firerat. Let's even make the lettering on fire, which is cinnamon whiskey, bit of a knockoff of Fireball. Uh, long ago, I knew a guy who was a music industry guy, and he just freaking loved Fireball. I don't know why, but that was his jam. He loved Fireball, and he would drink it straight out of the bottle. Kind of probably not a good sign in terms of indicators of rampant alcoholism if you can just chug that stuff right out of the bottle. But we're gonna, I guess, sort of pay tribute to him or poke fun of him, depending on your interpretation of events, with the whole Firerat Cinnamon Whiskey. Now, for all of these, I'm opting to keep the background fairly light. Of course, it depends. Some ads are going to be kind of more of a black on white, some will be more white on black, but kind of thinking of a little bit of an old fashioned kind of ad thing when things were a little, well, I guess what it would be in the days before Photoshop when color was a little more difficult to set up for ads. So you might have a splat, even if your ad was in color, you might just have little bits of it in the, say, in the logo or whatever. So that. The mascot of Firerat Cinnamon Whiskey. I have you could interpret this as he's breathing fire, or you could interpret it as he's blowing chunks. Either kind of works with that kind of a beverage, depending on the amount that you've been consuming. I think I will color in his hair, even though that's also fire, but I'm gonna make his hair black because then that kind of gives a little bit more contrast, I guess. And for contrast, I'm going to fill in it's kind of flames, kind of wings. We'll just fill that in black because that also gives more contrast. Yo, can I draw the Canadian flag? Yes, I can. Let me just find a scrap piece of paper. Uh, just because this is for a graphic novel, so I'm not going to draw it on that page because otherwise I just have to Photoshop it out. But roughly, I think the version on the Canadian flag has the maple leaf has a total of 11 points. So kind of three up, three out on either side. And it's got the two little points down by the stem to make it 11. Let's fill that in. And then, of course, we've got our two sidebars, which would be red, except I don't have red ink handy at the moment. Should be more like that. And we will fill them in with a fatter nib because that'll make it go a little smoother. It's way better than I can do. Hey, it's practice. I always like it's one of those things where it's like I know what it looks like. I mean, I live here, right? But my neighbor, well, actually right now my neighbor doesn't have their giant Canadian flag hanging from the front porch. I think they took it down to wash it because it was up most of the winter. But when I'm asked to draw it, then I have to stop a minute and go, okay, exactly how many points and in what proportion? Pull a little of the excess ink from the middle, fill it in. There's all sorts of things where it's like you know what it looks like, but when it's like okay, having to stop and draw it, you have to go, okay, wait a minute, now I gotta get that out of my brain and through my hand onto the ground. You'll stop just for that. Well, thank you. Welcome to the channel. So there we have it, a quickly drawn little Canadian flag. And now back to the fictional world of, well, Ricky and company actually live in Ratland. Um, and then there's a Mouseland across the river. But I think I decided that, ooh, a whole bunch of a bit of an ink spill off to the side, never mind. Um, I think the Canadian or the flag for Ratsville or Ratland is a wedge of cheese with orange stripes, which is to say they kind of plagiarized. But I stream a lot. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I stream Monday to Friday, at about 6:30 p.m. Usually, yeah, it depends on kind of what I have planned to do that day. Aim for 2 hours, but if I working fast and I get stuff done in an hour and a half, then I kind of stop there unless I've got something I can do really quick. Um, Depends on the day. Um, Usually, like these ad pages, I'll probably get through pretty quick. So I may end up doing a third page out of this graphic novel. I've got another thing that I do on Tuesdays, which is a calendar project for one of my comic things, and that I don't know why, but lately it's been taking me the entire 2 hours on a single page. So, eh, regularly, but I guess I was compared to, I know there's some streamers who do like 5 or 6 hour streams every day. So compared to that, then no, I don't stream a lot. Hey, be out every stream then. Awesome. Glad to have you on board. Yeah, this project is a book called Ricky B Goes to Sea. So it's these kind of rat dude characters, and then on Mondays I stream with stuff that's from a related project. Miles, who is half rat, half mouse. And then Tuesday, Thursday, I do stuff from my Noah's Archipelago project. And on Wednesdays, I'm kind of working on, I wouldn't go so far as to call it a reboot, but a revisiting of an old webcomic I actually had in the MySpace era. Will I be publishing? Yes, I'm going to self publish my stuff. Right now, actually, the first book is probably going to be a collection of the Noah's Archipelago comics. And I am actually waiting to hear back from Library and Archives Canada because if you're publishing in this country, you can get ISBN numbers for free. You just have to register with Library and Archives Canada and then request the ISBN. So I did the registration a couple weeks ago. I think it takes about a month. And then I should have an ISBN sometime in June, end of June. And then I can proceed with finishing off setting up assembling the book. And then there's a dance with Amazon because I'll be doing print on demand through there. And you always want to get an author copy to make sure they don't screw up. Oh, good to hear the Habs have beat Buffalo. My neighbor is going to be thrilled with that. I know he's from Montreal originally and has the Habs flags on his car and whatnot. So actually, he's probably that's probably why I'm not hearing any noise from the neighbors. He's probably down in the den watching having just watched that game, I would assume. So they won game one yesterday. Okay, cool. Yeah, I will admit I'm not really up on a lot of sports stuff, so kind of when I lived in Vancouver, like I live on Vancouver Island now. When I lived in Vancouver, then I would hear more of it, right? Just because, I mean, people here on the island also like hockey, but I mean, it's a little different versus when it's like your hometown team. If they get in the playoffs, like you will know, absolutely. So, which round is it now? I sound like an idiot, like I have no idea, but I know sometimes now the playoffs go right into June, right? So, but we can't be that far along. Are we into going into round three? Sound like an idiot, don't I? I just remember I do remember in 2011 when the Canucks lost in the final or whatever, round three, one more to go to the cup finals. Okay, right. That makes sense. Yeah, I remember when the Canucks screwed it up in the finals, and that was like the third that was around like the summer solstice, so kind of almost late June. But my brother used to follow the Avs quite a lot because he was a big fan of Joe Sakic, going way back to I think when Sakic was in the juniors or whatnot, and from Burnaby. Um, but I haven't heard him talk too much about. I don't know if Sakic retired or whatnot. So why is your profile pic a girl? Because I am a girl. I know have a deep voice. That's because I smoked in high school. Don't smoke, kids. This is what it does to your voice. But no, I am a girl. Usually I have sparkly nails, but I broke a bunch of them last weekend in the garden, so uh, haven't had a chance to. redo my manicure. Yeah, I know, I do not sound like I do not sound like a girl. The contralto I think a long time ago, I, in high school, I was taking, like, voice lessons or whatnot, my singer told me I was a, quote, "double bass contralto." More recently, last year, I was going to join the choir at my church for a while, and then the choir teacher couldn't wrap her head around the fact that of having a female singer who could sing deeper than the men. It's like, "I don't know, this is just the voice I have." "Yeah, okay, but even if you're a contralto, you should be able to hit the, G such and such and blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Yeah, my throat doesn't do that, so give me the bass line, I will sing the bass line." In the end, I decided, "You know what? I'm just gonna go sing from the, back with the congregation." It's gonna be a lot less frustrating for everyone, but, yeah. I am a genetic anomaly, apparently. What part of Canada do you live in? I live in I'm on the coast of BC. I'm on Vancouver Island. So, I think as the crow flies, I'm, like, 30 miles away from Vancouver, but because it's the ferry, it's, like, 4 hours. Born and raised in the suburbs of Vancouver, so I lived, uh I lived in Richmond, actually, my whole life until what was it? Well, not quite 10 years ago. It's nice over there. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of rain, which can get you down, although here on the island, we do get a lot more, sun than Vancouver proper does. Um, I've got family that moved from Vancouver to Calgary, and apparently Calgary is, like, the sunniest part of Canada or something like that. But Calgary, I think, gets, like, 3 or 400 more hours of sunshine than we do here, but we get, like, 3 or 400 more hours than Vancouver does, and Vancouver's very close, but I think what it is the clouds come off the Pacific, dump their rain on the west coast of the island. I'm on the east coast of the island, so we're kind of in a bit of a dry spot, like a rain shadow, and then the clouds go across the Georgia Strait, and then they get trapped by the big mountains, and they just dump onto, Vancouver. Um, so it's actually where I'm at, it's a bit of a odd spot, like, if I drove from where my dad is, and he lives about 20 minutes northish of here, down to Victoria, in the fall, you might pass through, like, 5 different things, like, it might be kinda drizzling where he's at, and then there'll be a section where it's just pounding rain bouncing off the cement, and then it'll just be overcast, and then you get down to Mill Bay, and suddenly it's sunny. So, odd things that the geography does here. Do I post a lot? I mean, I stream 5 nights a week. I try to post in addition to that, but, generally speaking, the posts kind of unless I've just put up a blog or something like that, which I try and do on the weekends, the post feature, not so much, but, I do stream usually 5 nights a week, give or take. This week, I missed yesterday's, but, yeah, usually I guess that counts as a lot. Uh, Although there's certainly people on YouTube who stream way more than I do, but and for longer periods of time, but it's kinda funny. I never used to, stream. I only started in January, but I found that it's really actually really good for kinda keeping me on track with the comics. Like, I started this book in 2023, thought I would have it done by Christmas 2023, and then I got sidetracked and whatnot. And then now that I've kind of work on it for at least a couple hours every Friday, I'm like I'm close to a third of the way through inking it. So, and I'm going to ink 2/3 of it on stream, and then I'll finish the remaining third off camera so as to not give away any spoilers. So hopefully this one will be out sometime in realistically 2027. Low key underrated. Thanks. I I am kind of terrible at promotion. I think that's my main problem because I run into, well, friends say, "Oh, what are you working on?" I'm like, "Oh, I got this graphic novel. It's about a punk rock rat dude, blah blah blah." "Oh, can I see it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Show them a picture on my phone, and they're like, "Oh my god, that's amazing!" I'm like, "Oh, thanks, cool." Like, how come you don't have more blah 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 blah? I'm like, I don't know, because I don't really do social media very well. Apparently, I don't know. Although also you have the algorithm issue. I for a while with Ricky, I was doing, and that's this particular page is done, so we're going to move on to the next page. And I'll also say this: the idea with these ads is they're kind of a B story that interrupts the main story and will become resolved. But it's kind of a play on, when you get intrusive ads on social media and you're having conversations, suddenly you're getting ads about something your friend mentioned that you've never searched for before. Uh, you had more 220. So I would love to have 1,000 subs, and I think maybe by the end of this year I will. At the beginning of this year, I think I had 130 subs. So it's definitely gotten a lot better. And there's some streams when I pick up like six sub 6 subs in a given night. Um, and I think actually last year, like I was doing some reels, like short, sped up drawing clips that I started doing in October, and I think I gained like 45 subs then. So like last summer, I think I had like 98 or something like that. So it's coming up kind of quick. I'm impatient, but I'll get there. Over on one of my, I have a couple Facebook pages. One of them for one of my comics, Noah's Archipelago. I had I have like 1,700 followers. The problem I run into there is Facebook throttles organic reach because they want you to pay to boost every single post. So anything I post over there, Facebook only shows it to like 15 to 20 people. So it's just brutal. Whereas here, it's like it takes a couple months, I think, for YouTube to kind of figure out like what kind of content you make, and then based on that, what kind of people would be interested in seeing it, and then it starts to show. So I'm definitely noticing in the last, 3, 4 weeks even that I'm getting much better impressions and whatnot. Obviously, it gave you the stream tonight, so that's awesome. So it's starting to figure out like, oh, okay, she does this kind of thing. These kind of folks would be interested in it. Um, but it just you kind of have to be patient with the algorithm. But at least here, it's like I think it's a more fair system. Whereas on Facebook, like they really strangle organic reach, which is a problem because I used to always be like, "Oh, I'm going to rely on Facebook." Well, that was actually a really bad idea. But you know, all things in their proper time, I guess. I I mean, I remember must have been like 10 years ago when they first brought in like the post boosting. I used to DJ on college radio, and I had a friend who did a similar show down in Australia, and his page for his show at that point, however many people he had on it, he would regularly get, 1,000 people seeing each of his posts when he would post like his playlists and get like 100, likes. And then just out of the blue one day, as soon as they brought in the now you can pay us to boost your posts, like overnight it went to like 10, 10 likes because of course they wanted him to give them money. So I like the business model that YouTube has much better. It's like, well, we want you to become popular, and then we will shove ads in front of your followers' faces. But otherwise, we're going to leave you alone. So that to me makes a lot more sense. But what do I know? Other than, YouTube is still the dominant video service, and Facebook is dying. So, you kind of look and go like, yeah, I think Google has the smarter business strategists, but you know, one thing I also did is I do like a weekly here's what the art I made this week kind of video. And I started, it sounds silly, but I was hearing people say like, "Oh, keep different content on different channels and whatnot." I was like, "That doesn't make any sense." So for a while, I had them over on this other channel, and I noticed like, oh, my live stream numbers seem to be getting better. But then I thought that was a fluke. So last month I was like, I'm gonna just post them on my main channel again. And then my numbers started dropping off within a couple weeks. And then it's like, okay, last week I put the recap on the other channel again, and now this week my numbers are better. It's like, okay, we stop experimenting with this now. I think we've got our data points. I don't know why the algorithm gets confused when I put my, because it's just me showing my work that I do on stream, right? You're the only one on the stream. You shouldn't be. But because at the very least, I'm monitoring the chat on my laptop and streaming from my phone. So that would be two of us. When is my stream finishing? Usually about 8:30, so another hour and 15-ish, something like that. Um, but I do know sometimes I'll have people where it will look and like there's nobody in the chat, and then somebody who was watching earlier and chatting earlier pops up and says, "No, I've been here all the time." Like, so I think if you have multiple tabs open, um, it only recognizes it as you're watching if it's on your main tab. So if you're like listening to the stream, or you've got it in a tab like smaller in the window so you can have a different window and be watching two things at once, then I think then it pretends like, oh, there's that person isn't really watching. I don't know. It's, you know, trying to figure out how they do the counts on all that stuff is just goofy. Reminds me of hearing, I remember in a psychology class I took at university a long time ago when they were talking about like animal superstition. It would be like for you, oh, okay, so you're 3 hours ahead, so you must be in Montreal or in Toronto. Anyway, somewhere in the Eastern time zone. Um, yeah, for me it's 7:18, 7:19. So but Fallout's fails if it's getting late. I do make the streams public the day after. When I end the stream, I leave it private overnight because oh, Three River, okay, cool. Um, I think one of my friends, who's not from there, but a friend of mine, used to travel a lot in Quebec. I think she had a pen pal in Trois-Rivières. I'm sure I butchered the pronunciation of that. Um, but yeah, what I was gonna say with the streams is, when it's all done, it takes, YouTube overnight to process. So for any of my streams, what I do when I finish, I let it be private until the next day. When it tells me I can download the stream, then I know it's done processing, and then I make it public at that point. So could be tomorrow morning, could be like 3 or 4 PM. It all kind of depends. But if you ever miss part of a stream and want to catch it on the replay, it will be made public again, sometime the day after. So I used to do that immediately after going off stream, but then I was hearing that, oh, how come this stream is kind of like pixelated or whatnot? Because it's of the processing, I guess, that it looks weird until it's had a chance to whatever it is that the robots do with it. Uh, so this is a fake ad for Rat Cola, which our main character Ricky thinks is the key to good hydration. Ricky is not a fan of drinking water because he thinks that that's what you use for cleaning and for flushing toilets. Which is a bit of an exaggeration of how I grew up, but I grew up where we drank Coke and, Sprite and all that stuff and not, healthy things. So, for the great challenge, can I draw these 3 bottles actually looking like a matched set instead of being completely different shapes? So I have to stop talking for a second and pay attention to what I'm drawing. Close enough. Now, can I do it a third time? All right. So 3 new flavors of rat cola, all of which I'm sure have all sorts of chemicals in them that you really probably shouldn't consume, as is the case with any of the sodas really, but somewhere I actually found online a recipe for, like, homemade root beer, like, making your own soda, and part of me is like and I guess you actually ferment it, so the bubbles come from the fermentation, and I have not tried it yet, but part of me is like, I love root beer, I really should try that. So, who knows, maybe one of these days I will have, homemade, soda to report on, but I feel like it probably ends up like the kind of root beer that you can get at, like, Whole Foods that is an interesting flavor, but does not taste anything like, the kind I grew up drinking. Let's give the cherries some whiskers, because after all, it's rat cola. Probably should actually, I think all my stuff, when I give my schedule, I think I've written everything in terms of like Pacific time, but I probably should just go ahead and add in something with the conversion because I know it's kind of a pain in the butt. I noticed that where I'm like, okay, if I'm watching something from the East Coast and I'm trying to figure out the live time, or I can go like, oh, great, now I have to do simple first grade math. But especially when you get into, like, daylight savings time or not, it does become a bit of a hassle, and I think here in BC, I think the government said we're staying on permanent, daylight savings time. I don't think that's gonna last very long because I do believe our American friends tried that in the 1970s and it lasted about 9 months. And everyone's like, bring it back. We hate this. Yeah. It all sounds great until you realize, oh, that also means that in December, it does not go well. So there you go, cherry rat cola. I'm just going to soak my nib for a minute and let it kind of get rid of some of the paper fiber that's gotten clogged in it while I take a quick sip. I am not drinking rat cola. I'm drinking actual water, but I'm fancy that way. All right, and our second new flavor of rat cola is going to be Dr. Rat Cola. And if any doctors were involved in the formulation of Dr. Rat Cola, I think it's safe to say that they probably all need to lose their licenses for malpractice. Let's make this bottle just a little bit fatter, and then that's also going to screw up the symmetry, but oh well. If it bothers me, I can always fix it later in Photoshop, but we try and kind of get things roughly correct on the paper. And speaking of doctors and the food industry and whatnot, uh, there's an interesting lecture by Dr. Jason Fung uh, where he talks about financial kickbacks in the medical industry. It's like, oh, I wish I didn't know that. But, anyways, we can definitely assume that any quote unquote doctors involved with the creation of Dr. Rat Cola, uh, presumably getting paid by the sugar industry. Apparently, you can find studies that when you look at it and you find out there's like, soda is good for you. Who paid for this? Coca Cola. And you're sure this has no bearing on the research findings, right? Shut up. Anyways, it's kind of fun to spoof that sort of stuff, but presumably the rat cola really is just knocking off Dr. Pepper. I remember as a kid, even and I love sugary sodas. I very briefly could kind of try and make myself choke down Dr. Pepper, but I don't know. It's just even for me, and I love sugar. That was a little too sweet. A little step too far for even my taste buds. But I do like the smell of Dr. Pepper. So I wonder if they still have. When I was in high school, we used to get like lip balms that tasted like soda and candy. I think it's Lip Smackers was the brand, and I know Lip Smackers is still around. I wonder if they still have like the lip balm packs where like there'll be one that tastes and well, more smells than tastes like Coca Cola, and one that tastes like Sprite, and one that tastes like root beer and whatnot. But they always had like a Dr Pepper one, and I kind of love that the lip gloss, but I usually could not stomach the actual soda. Yeah, vanilla rat cola. We'll assume that vanilla rat cola is also kind of a fizzy brown. Although logically, it would make sense to have it be a lighter color cola. I mean, the cola coloring is all toxic dyes, anyways. Um, but, whatever. So, not the most accurate drawing of a vanilla bean pod, but actually looks kind of more like a Zero mask, but whatever. We'll assume that that goes around. I've had vanilla beans, like the real vanilla beans, and they're like that long. They look more like the pen nib, but that doesn't necessarily read as well as, bean pod in terms of cartoons, so we'll do it this way. Kind of almost looks like DNA as well, but that would just make our friend Ricky look and go, see, vanilla rat cola is a scientific drink. That means it's good for you because the scientists are involved in all the chemical processes. All right, there is our ad for Rat Cola. And now we will do another division. I have to go over that line. Thicken it up a little bit. I don't mind my panel divisions being uneven. That's kind of a stylistic thing for me, or at least I call it style. Um, so I'm just gonna bring back out the book. So for last week, when we were showing Ricky talking about what he was picking up in his job as a runner at the studio, they we have him with the diet cherry rat cola and whatnot, and then he's picking up quote definitely not cola. So we are referring to that now in the ad I'm about to draw, which is a much more simple ad, kind of more like a classifieds kind of ad. Therefore, it's going to be very quick to draw, and we will move on to a back to the story kind of a page after that. So this ad is just going to say, and of course, it's referring to the wording in the Rat Cola ad. Now, realistically, this would be a very, very stupid thing for Mike to for this Mike guy. Actually, I just realized I'm not gonna call him Mike because Ricky's boss is Mike, and it's a different Mike. Let me think here. I'm gonna say for Nick. Uh, nah, I'm gonna say for Nate. I don't know why. I just like Nate's sound kind of flows nicer. There. I may Photoshop for a different name because now I'm just thinking. I think that there is elsewhere in the Ricky B. Rat world. I think there is. No, it's never mind. I was thinking there was going to be one of the other characters named Nate, who is not this Nate, but now that other character I'm thinking of is named Nolan. I know they don't actually sound alike, but my brain just files everything under what's the first letter of the name. So there's our second page of the ad spread. And before I go on to return to the story, I'm just going to take yet another sip of water. Hopefully, it doesn't pick up on the mic too much, but if you hear a glug, 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 that's why. All right. I am not drinking Dr. Rat Cola. I wouldn't dare drink any. Actually, I can't have stuff with caffeine nowadays. So, yeah. Anyways, I used to drink a lot of Coca Cola. Um, so, we return to the main story. And this is narrated by Ricky. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually draw a narration box. For those who have seen some of my older streams, you may have noted, you may remember me making comments about um, trying to decide if I should box out narration or not. Properly speaking, stylistically, you normally do box your narration, um, especially in a situation like that where Ricky's telling us about this scene. He's not in the scene. We don't see him. So it kind of should be boxed. And I don't use as fat of a line as I do for like the panel divisions that we just saw in the ads, but I use a medium nib for this. And then it's just, I do have pages I've already drawn where I haven't done that. I'm going to have to figure it out probably in Photoshop, honestly. But we're just going to do that. And I mean, it's a little close to the lettering there. If I need to, again, we can fix these things in Photoshop. But here we go. Now I get to spend the next hour or so drawing the Eiffel Tower. We are not going to be doing a perfectly accurate version of the Eiffel Tower, you know. Um, Instead, when we get way down here, we will have Ricky's boss and Mrs. Mike, as Ricky calls her. Her name is actually Brandy. But anyways, here we go. Now, I do have two trees that I kind of roughed in, but they're supposed to be trees that are a lot closer to Brandy and Mike. So rather than have them out here where it would almost look like they were next to the Eiffel Tower and big enough, I'm going to have them in front and kind of obscuring parts of the Eiffel Tower. So I'm just going to do some rough squiggles and add in a few branches here and there. We can have kind of poking through. And that's really kind of enough other than when we get, down here. But I'm not going to work too much on that because what did I say at the beginning? I don't want to smear. And I'm not going to try and get my arm in here too much. But if I twist my arm, you can sort of see that's a ink smear for when I didn't follow the left to right rule on Wednesday. So we're going to pop in our tree here. And it's going to get more detailed than this, of course, but this is just giving me my basic blocking. And I'll probably put in some plants there. So that's just a bit of a notification that wherever they are, they're in a park and they can see the Eiffel Tower. Where would that be in Paris? I don't know. I've never been there. So I'm not much of a traveler. I do like road trips, but yeah, these days even it just kind of tends to be smaller road trips uh, around here on Vancouver Island. Getting lost in the not really backwoods, but got some areas where, within a very short drive of town, you can be in a very rural kind of area, lots of forest, sometimes not even rural, just forest and the road. And as I discovered the hard way when I moved here to Vancouver Island in 2017, but actually even before that, because I was looking at real estate here for a few months before the move, they do have a bad habit of deciding that if you have a intersection in the middle of nowhere, they assume that you know what road you're already on. So a lot of the intersections only have like one road sign for one of the two roads that crosses. Problem being that roads twist and turn, and also a lot of roads will just, like, randomly change their names at spots where they at one point, they were in separate towns or separate whatever, and then towns or areas got amalgamated, so now it's the same road and it got joined up, but it has, like, 6 different names as you cross it, and not necessarily even in a long distance. I'm thinking of, like, there's one in town where it goes, uh it's Halem Road, then it's Trunk Road, then it's Government Road, then it's, Couch and Lake Road, and yeah, then it kind of depending which way you go, you could go one way and the same road, seemingly the same road, becomes Somenos. Like, anyways, there's, like, a whole thing of roads changing names and then, intersections that are only marked for one direction, so at least nowadays, if your car has a GPS or like, Apple CarPlay where you hook your phone up and if there's cell service, you can find out where the hell you're going. But a lot of that's fairly new. Like even a couple years ago, there were areas, one particular area I can think of, that you would always your cell reception would drop out close to the Cowichan River, and it's twisty and turny, and some of the roads don't really have signs. Anyways, so yeah, navigation here, a bit of a problem. Kind of apropos of nothing. Well, I guess I was kind of mentioning about road trips. So yeah, local driving hazards, I guess. Now, I didn't do it on the ad pages because they were all smaller drawings, but on here I will come after I've done my main drawing. I will use a fatter nib to add some like shadow and texture into the trees and you know, this sort of stuff. Yeah, I kind of just realized I had never really thought about exactly what time of year this story is supposed to take place in. Clearly, it's not winter because there's leaves on these trees. But was kind of I think when I first wrote the story, it was July of 2023, and there's definitely a couple spots at the very end of the book where things going on outside. It would make the most sense if it was summer. Um, but then there's reference in the narration. Ricky talks about, a month going by or whatever. So presumably the impetus for the story, like the page one, would have been maybe in the summertime, maybe in the spring or early summer, and then the story wraps up in the late summer. Um, so we'll probably, I don't know that I won't get to a fourth page tonight. So that'll be wrapping up um, next week. And I think then if I get 3 pages done next week in next week's show, then we will get back to the part of the story about the submarine. So for anyone who's missed what I'm talking about with the submarine, it's our main character Ricky, who's the narrator here, wakes up one Monday morning and he apparently hears the voice of God. Now, Ricky's not a liar, he is a misunderstander, so make of that what you will. But according to him, God told him to go forth unto the sea and get the big shiny rock from the shipwreck movie because that would impress his girlfriend. So Ricky plans to do that, and he figures he's going to build a submarine. Um, and the way that the story came about was actually in 2023 with the whole Titan submersible, the thing that was made out of junk and expired carbon fiber and imploded at the bottom of the sea close to the Titanic. That actually is what inspired this story. Now, when I'm drawing the Eiffel Tower, I'm not worried to definitely not worried about accuracy of it, but kind of having the kind of like a bracing kind of um, look to it. These would presumably be observation decks or whatever. Go through and put some cross beams around. And then, like I said, I'm not too worried about, if I wanted it to be 100% accurate to the Eiffel Tower, honestly, what you would do is get a photo and trace it, or be using a reference that a lot more tightly, but uh, it's kind of an ongoing discussion I had with a friend of mine from a local writers group where, because I make reference actually on the page that we won't get to today. There's reference to characters having working down in Los Angeles, and they're from Ratsville. And my friend sort of said, "Well, do you want to actually have mention of like real world places?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know, I kind of sorta do." Because also it's like, it's not necessarily the actual real world version of it. It would be like the Rats version of LA. Um, so fictionalized versions, so plus because these guys work in the entertainment industry, I guess the alternative would be you call it Rat Angeles or something like that. It's like, well, everybody knows you're talking about LA, so why not just call it LA? And the other thing is, Ricky is the narrator here. Has Ricky ever been to Paris? Probably not. In fact, we can be almost certain that he has not. So, therefore, we don't worry too much if about the accuracy because it's sort of supposed to be as Ricky sees things, if that makes sense. Which it might not. It probably doesn't, but you know. Um, a funny story, actually. Um, this morning, I was actually at a funeral for um, an acquaintance from church. That's not the funny part of the story, obviously. But I ran into another friend of ours who mentioned, like, I have a painting that's in the local art gallery right now with the Cowichan Valley Fine Arts Show, which is an annual show that the Cowichan Valley Arts Council does. So, anyways, my friend, I had told her, whenever we ran into each other last a couple weeks ago, I mentioned I had a painting in this thing, and she's like, "Oh, I'd love to see it." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Well, the show runs till May 30th, blah, blah, blah." So I see her today, and she's like, "I saw your rat," because it's a painting of Ricky, um, going with a jerry can, up to a gas station. And it's this, like, overcast day, there's lightning and all this stuff going on. It's this kinda weird, bizarre painting. Anyways, my friend says, "Yeah, I saw it. I don't get it at all, but it's very neat." Just, like, laughing, like, "Don't worry." So, it's one of those things where I put the painting in, and then on opening night, I go in there, and I was thinking, honestly, I enjoyed making the painting. It's a fun painting, I think. It's a weird painting. Is it my best work? No, I think I do my best work on these streams, honestly. And it's like, well, maybe next year, for next year's fine arts show, maybe what I need to do is actually put in some pen and ink stuff. Of course, then I have to frame it. Or the other thing would be to do this style of drawing with paint pens on a canvas. And I have some of that, but I don't have like a high, well, not that this is realistic, but a realistic, quasi realistic um, style. So who knows? Next year, I may have a painting in there that's actually more of a drawing because I will have done it in paint markers and have it be more line work based. I don't know. We'll see. I guess I should probably put something in, and then I think what I'll do in the background with these back corners, you just kind of go around like that, is that instead of doubling up the lines, they'll just be very faint. So like that. This Eiffel Tower looks like it's about to fall down at any moment. But they do say the actual Eiffel Tower is kind of rotting out as well. I mean, if I understand correctly, the Eiffel Tower was never intended to be a permanent monument. I believe it was supposed to just be like a one-time short display for like a World's Fair or something like that. And then I don't know, instead of getting scrapped and recycled at the end of the fair, it got left up there at I don't remember what the whole story is. But it's become a permanent structure that was not intended to be permanent and was not designed to be permanent. I assume they've done a lot of shoring it up over the years. But yeah. And before I continue down further, we're going to assume that we've got some like rolling hillsides in the background or whatever. Presumably, what we actually have is like skyscrapers in the back, actually. But we'll pretend that that's not what we see in the background. To think about that. Send a photo of this drawing to my best friend tomorrow morning after it's dried overnight. She spent a fair amount of time in Paris and loves France and all this, and just hear the screaming coming back about all the things I get wrong. Like, yeah, well, this is the rat version of Paris. It's not as accurate. It's not as well built. It looks suspiciously like the Union Jack on the side of the Eiffel Tower. I don't think the French would approve of that. But the rats probably can't tell the difference. Anyways. Actually, I said earlier that Ricky wouldn't know what the Eiffel Tower looks like. He probably would because his girlfriend, baby, probably has photos of it and is dropping hints that someday when they're married, that's where she wants to go on their honeymoon. So Ricky has to figure out how to afford Paris. We've got something going across like that. Now, my rendition of the Eiffel Tower here is going to be an exercise in what one of my university professors, who is a language professor, used to say whenever people asked him about, irregular verbs and stuff like that, and he would always just smile and say, "Consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds." When they would say, "But it's not consistent." Yes, well, consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. So we'll assume that the designers of this rat world version of the Eiffel Tower also believe very strongly that consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. Also, note that this is an opaque Eiffel Tower, and it's totally not because that makes my life easier as a cartoonist. No, of course not. It's a deliberate engineering choice on the part of the rats. That's my story, and we're sticking to it. I think there is like a it's not a concrete base exactly, but there's like some sort of like a plaza kind of thing, I think, around the base of the Eiffel Tower. So we're gonna draw that in there. We've got Mrs. Mike Brandy Ratenko's little speech bubble there. I'll probably make that fatter with a thicker pen after because I usually have the speech bubbles a little heavier on the outlining. But anyways, let's go on to this side of the tower. And I'm just gonna add a bush in over here just so I don't have to. So that there's other things I don't have to draw, basically. Before I get too far, I think I do want to indicate that there's some grass in there. So we'll use the trusty, not to be trusted glass pen. I say that because it's like with this, I'll have one angle where it works great, like there. And then at some point, I end up giving it like the teeniest, tiniest 16th of a turn, and then it doesn't draw at all. So, but it will be trying to drop big gobs of ink onto the paper because that's what it does. It's what all these pens do. Actually, while I think of it, I maybe I would do want to try and draw some of the Paris skyline in the back. So I'm going to pull up a reference photo, which isn't necessarily going to be stuff that you could actually realistically see from whatever position these guys are at. Although there is one view of the Eiffel Tower where it ends up where you can see some ugly skyscrapers in the background. So, uh, Paris Insider's Guide view. Da, 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 da. My God, those are some hideous buildings. What's seen from the Arc de Triomphe. But it got that one before it became a disaster. We will be freehanding when I do draw on that skyline. So did hear something along the way. I don't know how true this is, but that supposedly Paris made a rule that any modern buildings had to be built in like basically a second downtown core so that you wouldn't see so that if tourists were in like the nice historical parts of Paris with the tree lined boulevards and whatnot, they wouldn't see ugly modern skyscrapers. um, if that is indeed true, then it's a rule that a lot of North American cities ought to also implement, I guess. But I saw that pen. I don't know if the tapping when I do this picks up in the mic, probably not, but it's like. I do like these glass pens because the line they can get is very, very fine. They can be a pain in the ass, and sometimes they don't wanna draw at all. But I guess the other option would be to use, like, a crow quill, and I find the crow quill nibs honestly just shred the paper. I can never get bloody the hang of them to actually draw or write with them. So, whereas the glass pens do seem to work reasonably well, so that almost dropped a big glob of ink. Kinda looked like it was gonna do it again, so I managed to wipe off the excess in advance, but it's very repetition there's always at least one thing I draw every stream that's, like, super repetitious, and this is one of them. Wednesday night, I was, drawing, Louis, who is the he wasn't in a lot of Zombie the Destroyer comics, but I very briefly I was taking some French, classes, which I was terrible at, but, anyways, I tried doing, like, a French version of Zombie the Destroyer, and he was the French teacher. Um, so and I think I did, like, 10 or 12 of them, so basically kinda like 10% of the total Zamo comics, from that period. So, anyways, I did a portrait of him, I was trying to make him look like he was wearing a tweed jacket, and that was just like I used the same pen as I used for this line work, but it was like a lot of like da 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 da. Looked good when it was done, though. Yeah, turn it over, it doesn't wanna draw on that thing. Almost there, almost there. Come on, glass pen, you can do this last little bit. Yay, okay. So now we got the lawn bit done. And now I'm gonna look at this reference photo of the Paris skyline and some of these hideous, it's like all these low, very pretty buildings and then blech, concrete, steel and concrete monstrosities in the back. All right. So what's this first hideous thing? Can I make that picture bigger? No. Don't think that's the right reference photo, but it doesn't want to go bigger, so I gotta actually zoom in. So I'm going to start with there's a building here that kind of has a little side thingy there. It looks a little dark, and that goes straight down. And then it's got something like that, some shadow, and that's got like another fin type of thing on the building. And it's an eyesore like all of these glass towers are. And then there's another part of the glass tower that goes up, and then there's like a spire. Am I biased? Yes. I grew up in Vancouver, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, and Vancouver is full of ugly glass tower buildings. And then behind, there's like a black thing that looks like the opening of 2001: A Space Odyssey, kind of whatever. And there's another one of those 2000 Space Odyssey kind of black glass buildings back here. I don't think the viewpoint I'm drawing is actually accurate because the photo I'm using as reference says it was taken from the top of the Arc de Triomphe. And then there's this thing that I think is supposed to look like a glass box, but like that you can see through it, like it looks like an arch, but it looks unfinished, is what it looks like. So that's like that. And then you can see through it, and there's like, I don't know whether that's like a hill or whatever. And then we will mercifully be saved from seeing the rest of it by this tree. And then there's another of those black monolith buildings, but we just see part of it. And then be somebody who watching this going like, I like glass tower buildings. That's cool. You're allowed to like strange things. I like some Nickelback songs. You know, we're allowed to like bad things. Um, anyways, then over here we got another glass tower going on. It's like it's not like a black glass tower. It's not a clear white glass tower. It's a kind of a can't make up its mind glass tower. So I'm just gonna draw that with the scribble that it deserves. Give it the dignity it deserves, and then and there's another thing over here that kind of looks like a 2001: A Space Odyssey kind of building. And then there's some ugly 70s buildings back there. And then there's one, and then the Eiffel Tower in this view is doing us a favor and hiding other things. And then there's like some lower rise buildings back here. And then it looks like it just kind of fizzles out at that point, thank God. So, anyways, there we go. The Paris skyline, folks. Drawn by somebody who hates modernist buildings. Um, anyways, and now it just looks like a mistake, but that's because it is. Hey. Anyways. Again, I come from Vancouver. I know what I'm speaking of when I talk about ugly glass buildings. I remember many years ago, um, if anybody's ever seen Matt Groening's comic, like not what he was doing before The Simpsons, it's called Life in Hell. And there's this one um, where he was like comparing himself to his father. So, and it would be like what the dad said in the left box, and then what he says in this box, and various scenarios. And one of them was his dad telling him as a kid, when I was a boy, this is a bunch of open fields. None of these ugly buildings were here. And then Matt's saying to his kid, when I was a kid, there were a bunch of neat buildings here. None of these ugly strip malls were here. With the implication that then the son would grow up and tell his kid, when I was a kid, there were a bunch of neat strip malls here. None of these ugly AI data centers or whatever were here. So it's a funny thing. At some point, people will be nostalgic for the ugly glass and concrete buildings. Because architects will have come up with something even more hideous by that point in the future. Okay, so probably just saying before I go in, draw Big Mike and Mrs. Mike, I'm gonna just add some weight to these lines. So I figure out which one of these is my actual medium. That looks like my medium size nib. And what I'm about to do is going to make the trees come forward, which will make the tower go backwards. Well, even at that, you can see that's come. Boom. And let me get rid of this picture of the Paris skyline because we don't need it no more. Bye bye, ugly buildings. So, there we go. And I'll do that on the tower, and then that also pushes the buildings further away, as good taste intended. So you're doing that because down here there's some visual confusion between the leaves and the iron, whereas that goes boom and the leaves come forward. So like it solidifies what's but more contrast is closer to us type of thing. said earlier, I would make the speech bubble a little thicker. So now back to the narrower nib, and we are going to draw in the rest of Big Mike and Mrs. Mike. So she asks him, "Isn't this romantic?" And then she puts her face over his hand. So he can't really answer, but also because, well, I'll show you in a sec. Kind of continue this shrub here. Um, and I may give each of them a bit of a fatter outline, not all the way around, but just in parts to again lift them up in front. So the other reason why she's blocking Big Mike is she is taking a selfie with her handy dandy selfie stick. And, she kind of figures Big Mike would, her husband would kind of ruin the shot by being there. Really, she just wants herself in front of the Eiffel Tower. But Mrs. Mike is a bit of it's the old phrase, piece of work. So, I believe Kanye West once had a song about the likes of Mrs. Mike. She ain't messing with no blank, blank, broke, blank. Move this up a little bit so it doesn't get hidden so much. And crud in that nib. Probably because I do find towards the end of a stream, like probably got another 10 minutes to go or so. But sometimes this particular nib, as we get towards the end of the stream, starts becoming really clogged. Anyways, doesn't have much more to go. There's Big Mike's chest hair, which is snow white, along with the bits around, at the bottom of his head, around the side of his head. One of his trademark Hawaiian shirts. And then his undershirt always has a stain of some sort on it. Now, Big Mike, for anyone who's missed previous streams, Big Mike is uh, very successful and somewhat famous record producer. But he dresses like his bum because his attitude is women only care about what your bank account and your wallet looks like. They don't. So it's kind of like he deliberately makes himself a little bit gross. Uh, or I guess from another perspective, because of his position in life, he has young bimbos throwing themselves at him, so he doesn't need to try, you know. And so he doesn't. He's trying to reach out for Mrs. Mike, and she is shoving him back. And he always wears cargo shorts. I think I usually draw his watch on his other wrist, but for the sake of this drawing, we will make sure that we draw his watch right, right there in the yeah, right there in the open. And yes, it is a Rolex or a Ratlex or whatever the Rat World version of it is called. And then we need a little bit there. All right, let's give them a bit of a fatter outline to pop them out just a wee bit. It's probably a bit more than I wanted, but lest anyone feel bad for Big Mike, let's just say they deserve each other. I'm not gonna name names, but a friend, yeah, one of my Facebook friends and I were talking not that long about a certain celebrity couple and trying kind of arguing about who was worse, the guy or the gal. And my conclusion is he insisted the guy was worse. I was like, they're both terrible, but it's like 48 to 52. She is the 52. Uh, so I think that doesn't always happen. Sometimes a terrible person manages to snag somebody who's, kind of like a long-suffering saint type. But you often terrible people hook up with other terrible people. Again, not always the case. And I'm thinking especially, in the entertainment industry, you get the gold digger who goes and finds the scummy producer, the scummy rock star or whatever, and they both treat each other like shit. They both view each other, view the relationship in transactional terms, and it's kind of like, well, y'all are perfect for each other then. Let's add a little more kind of leafy texture over here. Of course, to be fair, also, I guess it depends how did things start out versus how did they end up. I used to have a comedy project called The Nick White Show, which is still up on, I think if you go on my channel page, Pierre Draculea, and scroll right down, I think it's listed under like featured channels or my other channels, The Nick White Show. But the idea was that and what I did was I set up tableaus with, like, Barbie dolls and sets that I built and stuff like that, and then I did voiceovers and would film it. So it was almost like a it would be something like this, but it would be 3D because it would be, like, the dolls in that position, then I would have built, like, a little set. Um, so it was like a 3D video comic book. Anyways, the main character, Nick White, is in that world supposed to be the second biggest rock star of the 1980s. He's an absolute scumbag. His wife, Joanne, or JoJo, is absolutely horrible, you know, and can't wait till he dies so she can take his money and all that. Because if she divorces him, unfortunately, he has a pretty good prenup. So she would kind of get screwed. I'm going to give Mrs. Mike dark lips. Anyways, but I remember when I was writing that, sometimes I'd be like, okay, but which came first? Like, was Joanne always horrible, or did she go into the marriage with Nick hoping for true love and whatnot? And then when it became clear that he's a narcissistic scumbag and viewed her, in a very transactional manner, that she just kind of settled for, well, I'll get the bastard's money. So, anyways, certainly, I mean, I grew up I was a kid in the 80s and was into like Metal Edge magazine and, reading about these LA rock stars and all that sort of thing. Um, so I kind of grew up on some of the gossip and stuff. And this is going back before, say, Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson and that whole thing. That was in the 90s. Like when I was a kid, Tommy Lee was married to Heather Locklear and they had their own drama and whatnot. So you read some of the stories about, the groupies of the era or the ex-wives and all that, and then, they sound terrible, and you find out what they went through and all this, and you kind of feel bad for them, and yeah, it's kind of terrible situations all around, I guess. But instead of doing, like, sympathy and sociology, it's more fun in the comic context to have this sort of a take on it. Flip side, again, not gonna name names, but the rumor I heard about one individual I once knew, he slept on the sofa, he screwed around, and the second their kid went off to college, he and the wife went their separate ways. So it probably had been untenable since the kid was a kid, but then it's like, okay, we're staying together for her. We're gonna stick it out until the kid's 18. As soon as the kid goes off to college, call the lawyers and sort it out. I don't know if it was like a pre-planned arrangement that that was what it was going to be, or if it was just like the wife had enough of his shit, and as soon as the kid was old enough, it's like, well, I don't have to stay with this asshole anymore. Because I did kind of get the impression it was the missus that was like, okay, get the fuck out. I knew somebody else where his intentions were good and his ex-wife was terrible. So, I think the point is that you have both now. I think leaving this white is gonna look distracting, so I'm just going to kinda just put some fine, scritchy, scratchy kinda lines in, and that's just gonna kinda tone it. Obviously, on this scale, if it a you know, wouldn't actually be like, there would be concrete pads or foundations under the corners. It wouldn't be like one, giant slab of concrete big enough for the Eiffel Tower to sit on. So you wouldn't get like concrete line type of stuff, but you know, in terms of texture, we're gonna do it that way because that also kind of tones it, and then it also makes like they're the brightest. Now, let me just look. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to first of all give some color there. I think I'm gonna kind of tone Brandy's dress just a little bit, making it kind of pull and whatnot. So it's not like a purely black dress, but it's got some tonality to it. So it's a little darker. One of her boobs is bigger than the other, but I guess the surgeon has kind of made some errors. Surgeon needs to top up her implants, perhaps, or the one implant, anyways. So I think there we have it. Oh yeah, Big Mike needs some hair on his belly, fat old belly hanging over that, and why don't I just gonna get a little bit of shadow on the belly, like that. And look at that. I think let's give Brandy's jaw a little bit like that. All right, I could fuss with this more, but I think I'm gonna stop there. So, yay, 3 pages. Let's have a recap of what we did tonight. First off, I will show last week, so we kind of have our lead in. So I put my shot glass of black ink off to the side so I don't knock it, because that would suck. If I knocked it, it spilled all over what I just spent an hour drawing. So, um, anyways, last week's we had Ricky saying, because the week before then, like we only got the 2 pages done last week. The week before then, he had still been arguing with Big Mike, and Big Mike basically told him to go clean the toilets. So Ricky was daydreaming about sticking Big Mike's head in the toilet, and then he was thinking he'd be going dumpster diving for submarine parts after work. I don't know what dumpster he thinks he's gonna find submarine parts in, but Ricky's hopeful. Anyways, so he's complaining about that, and then we had an ad for Intern Depot. Uh, and then he talked about that instead of going, I'm gonna stand up so I can zoom out on the oh well, the camera is my phone. So if we do that. So then last week we had Ricky going and running errands, right? So he's going, getting booze, he's getting Firerat Cinnamon Whiskey, he's getting McRat Burger, bringing it in by the pallet. And then he's got Rat Cola, other munchies, pizza and chips and stuff, and quote unquote, definitely not cola. So then that leads into what we started with, which was advertisements interrupting the story, and they are for what Ricky was telling us about. So I'll bring that back down here. So McRat's Burgers. I'm probably going to Photoshop that out so it's McRat Burgers or just McRat Burger, but for whatever, and then it's kind of called McRats instead. Um, but anyways, we got the burger. We got 57% less flies than the competition. We got the ad for Firerat Cinnamon Whiskey, Ratolay Munchies, and then we had the ad for Rat Cola and Not-Cola. Very stupid of this Nate guy to put an ad in the comic book because now the cops will know what to phone when they want to do a sting, but whatever. And then we started back to the story. Now I have like three of these books for this, three of these Profolio books for the drawings for this graphic novel. We are one page away from finishing this first book, and I'll give you a sneak peek of it. We will be working on this next week. So Big Mike's away on vacation, and then he's talking about the other guys at the studio being away. So this gives Ricky some time to work on stuff. So, anyways, we are about a third of the way through. In the next third, we will start combining, Ricky's going to start noticing those ads, and that's going to be our B story. So, and actually, before I finish, I just think I should probably have a bit of a thicker line, thicker shadow or whatnot under that arch because it's going to bother me. So let's do that right now. And just doesn't take much, but that just pops it more. So I don't do there. Anyways, that was going to bother me, so now it's fixed. Anyways, so then the narration continues, where Ricky says he finally had some downtime at the studio because it was Big Mike's anniversary, and Mrs. Mike made it real clear he had to take her to Paris this time, or she was going to divorce his cheating ass and take him to the cleaners. Now, you may notice that the text does not line up with what I had originally put in the non-photo blue pencil underdrawing when I laid out the lettering. But the nice thing with non-photo blue is when I scan this in black and white, the blue is going to go bye-bye. Or 90% of it's going to go bye-bye. I may have to do a little bit of photoshopping on the text, but even though I was pressing pretty hard, it should be fine. Got some weird little speck of something over the G. So anyways, there's definitely going to be photoshopping after everything's said and done. It all gets scanned, and then I have to do some tweaking. But anyways, so then to go with that bit of narration, we've got Big Mike and Mrs. Mike in Paris in front of the Eiffel Tower in a view that probably doesn't really exist. We've got some ugly modern buildings in the background that just kind of look like a mess because they are. Anyways, and she's taking a selfie and she's saying, "Isn't this romantic?" and shoving Big Mike her hand over Big Mike's face so it's not going to be in her ruining her photos. So 3 pages done. Next week, of course, on Friday night, we will be carrying on with this page, and then I'd have to look and see what the next 2 pages at the start of the first book is. But we will be carrying on with the story. And then in terms of my usual streaming, I'll just put that right there. So I stream. A couple people have asked me about this in the chat earlier today, so that's why I'm mentioning it. I stream pretty much every weeknight at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, which would be like 9:30 Eastern time. And Fridays, Ricky and Miles. Currently, Ricky B goes to sea. Monday, also Ricky and Miles, but I'm working on a Miles project. Ricky and Miles now are in the same universe. Miles is Ricky's girlfriend's cousin. But when I first came up with the characters, they were not in the same universe, and I just realized it would be very strange to have one comic universe where I've got this mouse dude and another comic universe where I have this rat dude, you know. So I figured out ways to combine them. But these projects, Ricky B Goes to Sea and then Miles Marv's Pursuit of Happiness, were written before I brought them together. So right now we're working on them as separate entities, but actually, the Miles book I'm working on, the current phase of the art, I think I've got like 6 weeks to go. And then that section is done, and I have to do a bunch of writing before I can do the next phase. So we will be working on um, it'll actually be something what they call a reader magnet. So something that will be a freebie for signing up for the mailing list that I'm about to launch in the next couple weeks. I'm going to launch it with like some coloring pages as sign up bonuses, but then I'm going to be working on some illustrated short stories. You'll see. Anyways, so that in about 6 weeks, we'll start having Ricky and Miles interacting on the Monday night streams. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Noah's Archipelago. Tuesdays is a calendar project that's full color marker art. Thursday is coloring book pages, so that's all fine liner. And then Wednesday, we're working on some stuff with Sama the Destroyer. So there's my little plug for future, um, plug, or if somebody's wondering specifically what I stream on what day, there you go. Now, for this stream, like with all my other streams, and I'll bring Brandy and Mike back on. What I do is I wait until YouTube finishes processing to make it public. So obviously it's public right now because I'm live. Um, and then when I end the stream, it's going to be private for the 12 to 24 hours that YouTube takes to process it into good quality, and then I make it public. So if you missed a bunch of this episode, for anybody who's just tuning in now or whatnot, uh, tomorrow it'll go live on my channel, so you can catch the replay then. But there's a bunch of other stuff to catch up on if you would like, that you can also view on my channel. So, anyways, blah, blah, blah. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, thank you for your patience. And that's going to be it for me for tonight and for this week. So, everyone, have a great weekend. Bye for now, and we'll see you again real soon. And bye bye, Mike. Or bye bye, Brandy, and bye, Mike. Anyways, bye for now. Take care.